ですか?
Tondagosa. I'm Cody Nokolo, and this is Mother Forever. Today, I'll be reading my exclusive interview with Ryan Vendendik, creator of the 2015 Mother-like indie game Citizens of Earth, and its 2019 follow-up, Citizens of Space. This is part of a series of interviews with Mother-like indie developers I'm bringing to you this summer. At the beginning of September, I'll be reading my interview with the creator of Lisa the Painful, Austin Jorgensen. And shortly after that, you'll hear one final Mother-like game discussion with the developers of a surprise final game. Stay tuned. Now for my questions to Ryan Vendendik. My first question: where did you first discover the Mother series, and how did you feel during your first experience with it? He said, I had seen Earthbound in the video rental store as a kid. I would have been around 9 years old at the time when it came out. It was very memorable since it came with a player's guide, so on the shelf of the store it was a massive box, absolutely dwarfing everything else around it, so you really couldn't miss it, but it was never available to rent for a while. Then, one day, I came home at the end of a weekend camping trip and it turns out my brother was able to rent it while I was gone. At that point, the rest is history, I guess. I was obsessed with it from the moment I sat down to play it. It had all the familiar feelings of RPGs from the NES and SNES, but was just so distinct. The art style, the humor, the modern setting, everything was just so instantly unique and memorable. And then of course, as you progress, all of these things are just dialed up even further with unforgettable characters, hilarious dialogue, a really fun battle system, and a really fascinating, sinister plot that is in such a bold contrast to the otherwise humorous and colorful world. Second question, do you have a favorite game in the series and why? He said, my favorite is Mother 2, Earthbound. The reason being that I played it at the perfect time in my life and in the history of video games. When it came out, I was young enough to have the free time to be able to play it obsessively, and at the same time, there was just nothing else like it. So it came at such a formative time in my life and really made an impact on me as a player and a creator. Next question, what are some of your favorite characters, songs, locations, and moments from the series? He said, my favorite song is Pollyanna, which is probably a popular choice given that it's in every game in the series. It's very beautiful in its own right, and the lyrical composition is very uplifting and encouraging. And finally, the remix made by Dale North for the Bound Together project was so beautiful that I actually included this song in my wedding. And in a strange tale of things all coming together, I was able to meet Dale and tell him about this when he came to visit Atlus's booth at E3 2014 to play Citizens of Earth. So that was a nice moment. Additionally though, I love all of the battle music of Earthbound, and this was a big inspiration for us in making the battle music of Citizens of Earth. In terms of favorite characters, Dungeon Man all the way. He's such a fun character, and then he joins your party as a mobile personified dungeon to beat up enemies for you. Amazing. Although my favorite game in the series is Mother 2, two of my favorite moments in the series come from Mother 1 and 3. I'll try to avoid spoilers here, but they are both at the end of their respective games, so it'll inevitably be a bit spoilery. Throughout the series is this running theme of love and self-sacrifice, which is made all the more powerful by the sharp contrast to the humorous nature of the games. At the end of Mother 1, you learn that Mary's love is so strong it is literally the only counter in the face of ultimate evil. And of course, essentially unbeknownst to you for most of the game, you've been assembling the memory of that love through the melodies and the lullaby, so it has a shocking narrative effect when you realize how all the pieces come together. I think this is probably a compelling narrative element in its own right, but I should also note that this is particularly resonant to me as a Christian who believes that it is the love of God that overcomes evil. And I do wonder if that was an inspiration to the creators of Mother 1, insofar as they named the character Mary, and it's her relation to a child that is the profound moment here, echoing in some ways Mary, the mother of Jesus. And then at the end of Mother 3, you learn the fate of Klaus, who essentially decides to end his own life rather than continue to fight you. It's a tragic end to the tragic tale of an innocent character, and I do remember tearing up while playing this part of the game. Fourth question, did you ever interact much with the community on Starman.net? If so, what was your first impression of that community? He said, "A little, but I'm afraid to say it wasn't a positive one. I posted there while developing Citizens of Earth, and unfortunately we were met with an incredible amount of hostility. Given my ardent love for the Mother series and the fact that Citizens of Earth was heavily inspired by it, I had expected people to be excited that we were trying to develop something in the spirit of the Mother series. Instead, we received mostly negativity, and one of the mods reached out to tell me that although he thought the game looked cool, it inspired a great deal of rage amongst the other mods, and they were considering a wide range of punitive measures against me for my post. I'm still not sure why it evoked such a hostile reaction, but I essentially haven't returned to Starmen.net following that experience." Next question, what were your favorite experiences you've had with the Mother community? He said, "My favorite experiences are from people who thank me profusely for making Citizens of Earth because they love the Mother series, and they couldn't find anything else like it until they played Citizens of Earth. And in many ways, this was the whole reason I made Citizens of Earth to begin with. I wanted to play more Mother games, and Nintendo wasn't making any, so I decided to make my own." Sixth question, our website and members of its community have been discovering many previously lost pictures and information about the N64 version of Mother 3 recently. Do you have any strong opinions or other thoughts on that version of the game? He replied, "I was really excited for this game while it was in development. There wasn't very much information out there, especially back then when the internet was still very new, but I would devour every tiny bit in the Nintendo Power magazines and reread it over and over again. In retrospect, I think this game would have been very beneficial to the longevity of the series, because it would have shown that the series was able to evolve with the changing technology and the expectations of players. Additionally, I think that there was a missed opportunity here because thereafter Nintendo included NES in Smash Bros. On the N64, introducing many people to him and Earthbound that had never heard of him. And when we see a similar parallel with the inclusion of Marth and Roy in Smash Bros. Melee, coinciding with their first release of a Fire Emblem game outside of Japan, we see a surge of interest in that franchise. I suspect we could have seen a surge in Mother interest had things worked out a bit differently back then. Question 7. What were your expectations of Citizens of Earth before finishing it, and how did the completed game differ from those expectations? He said, "It's hard to explain the expectations of Citizens of Earth because it was a very strange experience, wrapped up in so much work that it was hard to keep my thoughts straight. Even saying expectations may overstate my thoughts at the time. I hoped, but didn't necessarily expect that people would love the game and it would bring a lot of joy to people. And I think that did sort of end up being realized, but one big difference between that hope and the reality is that once the dust settled on all the review scores and such, Atlas told us it was the most polarizing game they ever released. Opinions were wildly divided, with a lot of people absolutely adoring it and a large number of people despising it with a pretty intense hatred. On that note, I guess another difference between expectation and reality is I expected that people would either enjoy the game or just ignore it. But where this differed from reality is that some people hated it so much we received death threats and invitations for us to all commit suicide. So that was a pretty bizarre and disconcerting difference from our expectations. Question 8. Do you have any favorite parts of your games that you didn't think too much about, but players seemed to enjoy more than expected? He replied that one thing that comes to mind is that the design of the game was quite different initially, but when I brought on the game's art director, Robin Carpenter, his art for the citizens was so distinct that it really transformed the design of the game and the world. So I guess it's hard to say if players seemed to enjoy it more than expected, since I also thought the design was really awesome. But this was the thing that came to mind for me, since I sort of got to enjoy it along with the players, because Robin just took it and ran with it, so I got to see his creativity sort of in the same way that the players got to. So that was a lot of fun. Question 9. Are there many times where it's difficult for you to get motivated to make things, and is there anything you tend to do to get yourself motivated when you need to work on something? He said, I don't think I really suffer from having a hard time being motivated to make things in general. I absolutely love making games. It's such an immense joy and privilege to be able to do. Since I wear many different hats on the team, programmer, designer, scriptwriter, etc., I sometimes have difficulty motivating myself to work on a specific part of the game though. For example, we may need to write a bunch of dialogue in time to get the voice recording done, and I'm just not in the mood to be creative and funny at the time. My answer for this is in some ways pretty plain, and in some ways depressing. There's often so much work to be done that after staying up to 4 AM programming, writing some dialogue feels like a delightful change of pace. So just throwing myself into making progress on some other area for a while can free up the mental energy to work on some other part of the game. Next question, did you deliberately decide to include any particular Mother tropes in your games? He said, the main trope we included is probably the modern setting of Citizens of Earth. It occurred to me that aside from the Mother series, there really aren't that many modern RPGs, so I figured, let's make one. So that broad thematic setting was definitely inspired by Mother. Additionally, one thing I really enjoy about the Mother series is this pervading sense of love. The signature ability of Lucas in Mother 3 being PK Love even. And very early on in the development of Citizens of Earth, we made the decision to not present things negatively. Even though the main character, the Vice President of Earth, is a bit of a bumbling fellow, the humor in the game is always good-natured. Similarly, for Citizens of Space, the main character, the Ambassador of Earth, is exuberant to a fault. But again, it's all presented in a package of good-natured fun, and, ultimately, overcoming odds to be an unlikely hero. Question 11. Which aspects of the Mother series were the most inspiring for you? He replied, the modern setting, humorous tone, and uplifting message were massive inspirations for us in making Citizens of Earth and our later games as well. And final question. Do you have any plans for future game projects or anything else in particular that you're working on and would like to mention? If so, do you think the Mother influence will continue into those next projects in any specific ways? He said, we're working on a new entry in the Citizens series. I don't have a ton of specific details to share yet, but I can tell you that it's a prequel to Citizens of Earth, and we'll be able to see the VP as a kid, learn why the VP's dad is conspicuously absent from Citizens of Earth even though his mom is a character, and tie together a few of the mysterious details revealed in Citizens of Earth as well. The gameplay won't be exactly the same as Citizens of Earth, but it'll be familiar enough. If you think of how Citizens of Space was similar but distinct from Citizens of Earth, you can kind of imagine how this game will be like Citizens of Earth, but very much its own unique creation as well. And that's all for my interview with Ryan Vendendik. What do you think? Was there anything that really interested you? Let me know in the comments and be sure to follow him on Twitter through the link in the description. Subscribe to see more Mother news and my interviews with more Mother-like indie game developers in September. This has been Cody Nokolo. Potential